Do you have any fears? I have some, and I do try to conquer them. Would you like to join me as I try to conquer one of my greatest fears? Heights or acrophobia. What is your fear? Leave it below. Have you tried to conquer it?
In this episode, we're going to have a little bit of fun. We're going to meet my friend Bill. He works, and you can find out a lot more information about what we're going to do. But I'm going to try to face a fear of mine, which is heights. And I've always wanted to fly a plane. And one day when I was talking to Bill 3 years ago, he said that he would make it happen. And I actually want to be able to control the plane, because I think that would help me. Let's see what Bill has in store for us. This has also created an awesome opportunity for the JGP Prowl group to explore and learn a little bit about flying themselves.
The group's been around for quite a while. It was much larger a couple of decades ago. We had like 5 or 6 airplanes. But we own 3 airplanes in the group. 2 of the airplanes are World War II veterans. They're both trainers.
Okay.
So they were used for training pilots in World War II. One of our airplanes is a civilian trainer, but it's old as well. It was originally designed in 1947, although ours was not built until 1966, I believe. It was built from, they restarted the line, but it's an old style airplane. What our goal here is to preserve some of the history of Canadian aviation in World War II and Canada's contributions. Many people know, but most people don't know that Canada was a major contribution in World War II. It was not just personnel and people and everything like that, but we were a training center for aviation, for air crews.
Oh, okay.
From around the world. So it quickly became apparent when the war started, Britain was an island, and they were fully committed to war. And they have a lot of friends around the world, and around the Commonwealth. So Canada was part of the Commonwealth at that time. And Mackenzie King, the Prime Minister here, said, we can make a big contribution here. We can train people in Canada because our weather's good. Our country is huge. We're not under severe rationing like they were in England.
Yeah.
And we're not being bombed every day.
Yeah.
So we have the space, we have the weather, we have the people we can put to work. And this, also says that we can make a good civilian type of, put civilians to work rather than just sending young boys off to war. In the 1941, late 40s, the program started. In 1941, it was kind of got going. And this airport, Edenvale, was built to support that training plan. It was built as what they call a satellite field to Camp Borden. So Borden was the big field, but they knew they would be so busy that they couldn't do everything in one airport. So they built Edenvale, and they built an airport out by Alliston, which is just south of the town. It's now a potato farm, so it's not there anymore.
Okay.
But Edenvale is still here, and the runway structure you see and this space that's around us is much as it was in the war. What's different is the buildings.
Okay.
None of these new modern buildings were here. The only building surviving from World War II is the 2-story building by the road.
Oh, okay.
And the rest of the buildings in the war were over here to the southwest or southeast. And you can see their foundations from the air easily. You could drive over there and see it's all concrete. It's actually not airport property anymore. So we don't go over there. But when we fly over, you should be able to look down. If I don't remind you, you can look down and you'll see the foundations of the old hangars and accommodations, the mess hall. There was a water plant there. There was maintenance facilities, tool shop, all that kind of stuff for working on airplanes. So during World War II, this airplane was used as a training base. They did what they call secondary flight training. So pilots had already learned how to fly, but were learning how to fly better.
Okay.
And more complicated airplanes. So that's what they did at Camp Borden. The initial training was done in Toronto at Malton. Was one of the major ones, and they flew airplanes like our Tiger Moth there. and like a biplane, like
Okay.
a Tiger Moth or
Yeah,
a
yeah.
Fleet Finch, or a more slightly more modern version would have been the Cornell. Although, as far as I know, there were no Cornells in the Toronto airport at
that
Pearson,
time.
like what Pearson, what's called Malton at the time. At that time, this airplane, though, was used by the RCAF in World War II. It was built in 1943. It's an American design called Fairchild PT-26, but Canada needed the aircraft, so they went to the US. They said, yeah, we can give you this. It's much more modern to 1940s than the other design, which is the 1920s design, and much more closer to what the pilots would be experiencing when they moved on to fighters or bombers later on. So this was used for initial training, the PT-26. However, the United States couldn't build them because they were building their own for themselves.
Yeah.
So Canada got a license and we built this in Fort Erie, Ontario. So it's a Canadian-built airplane. 2,000 were built, sent across Canada. This one was in Picton, Ontario.
Okay.
And was actually put in storage. So it was used for a little bit of training. We found the old logs, and it was used for just a few flights of training, but mostly just kept aside in case of need as an accident. As the aircraft went away, then they could bring this one in. At the end of the war, it was declared surplus and was donated to Brandon Flying Club. And they flew it for a number of years. Then it went to private owners after that, and through a chain that it ended up here about 7 years ago, 8 years ago.
So it's kind of a new plane.
It's new to us.
Yeah, new to you.
It's 80 years old.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so this is the kind of airplane that a young person would have hopped in at 18 and said, you're going to be a pilot. We think you can be a pilot. You would have hopped into this airplane and you would have learned to fly and fly it solo. And then if you were capable of that and considered like you still have more potential, then you would move on to the advanced trainers like at Borden, and those were called Harvards. Yeah, Harvard looks much like this, but it's about 30% bigger.
Well, okay.
It's three times more powerful and has more complicated systems on it.
Yeah.
And so that would be a advanced trainer. Once you finish the advanced trainer, you got your flying wings. And we're back to the training plan. At the end of the plan in 1945, pretty well January, they wrapped it up. It was months before the end of the war. It's late 44, actually. The program started to wind down. We had trained over 150,000 air crew. Half of those were pilots. The other half were people like bomb aimers, navigators, radio operators, gunners. And then of that 150,000 again, we can break it down by nationality. Half of them are Canadian. The other half were basically English, New Zealand, Australian, American, because for the first year of the program, America wasn't in World War II.
Oh.
So a lot of Americans wanted to go fight. So they joined the Royal Air Force and came to Canada to train. And there were also people there, nearby here in Muskoka, not too far up the road, Norway ran their own program. And they used Cornells. And they trained Norwegian pilots, but they had Norwegian instructors, Norwegian pilots, and some of the staff, like even the cooks, were Norwegian.
That's cool.
If you ever go up to Muskoka, stop at the airport terminal, look, they've got a great big display there of the activities in World War II. And it was called during the war, and still some people will remember, it's called Little Norway, because there were so many Norwegian people there. Muskoka wasn't a big town in 1943, 44, but it was probably like 10% Norwegian for a while.
So it makes sense being Little Norway.
So they called it Little Norway. And so that was, part of the result was the training of the people, but the net result also was that across Canada they built 65 airports. Mostly in towns that didn't have airports or had a dirt strip. Now all of a sudden they've got a concrete runway. So this opened up post-war, all of a sudden we had a new ability to transport goods across and people across Canada to like Swift Current. Didn't even have a run. They had a grass strip and now the next thing they have 3 runways. They've got a hangar. They've got a control tower. They've got an ability there to do maintenance, a rail line to the airport. And the highway was built around towards the airport, like the roads were improved.
Yeah.
So although the program cost Canada over $1.5 billion in 1940 money,
that's a lot.
the British paid $2.5 billion towards the program, and we ended up with 60 airports.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah,
And a whole carpenters, cooks, cleaning, maintenance people who stayed, they were Canadian people, and they were trained to look after engines, or they were trained to look after hydraulic systems, or they were trained. So we ended up with a huge training plan for Canadians as well as those that went overseas to fight.
Very cool.
Yeah, so that whole program was very successful, and it's a good feather in Canada's cap. Not a story talked about much.
Yeah.
And so that's what we try to do. We try to keep the story going. That's why we have these 2 World War II airplanes. As I said, the Cornell was a Canadian one.
Corn mazes are so much cooler now.
So it's got a little bit of heat, but we don't fly the plane in the winter. It's hard on the engine and airframe, because it's all wood.
Oh, okay.
So exposing it to cold temperatures and then warm temperatures again, you can build up condensation.
Yeah.
Because it's although it's skinned and everything, it's hollow inside. So you get that air hot and cold, hot and cold. If there's any moisture in there, it'll drip, it'll stick, it'll get to the wood.
I know that, I want to do more, but it's just...
Okay, that was so scary. When I turned right and we went down, I just couldn't deal with that. It was just, I don't like roller coasters. But I'm so glad that I gave it a second chance. Thank you, Bill, for being there and just sort of letting me be. It was awesome. And then getting to actually fly the plane.
Very tricky thing. So when we're doing that final left turn, I said I'm going to start my left turn to the runway now.
Yeah.
That left turn is called the dead man's turn, because if you don't concentrate and just keep the airplane in what they call trim, so that means it's following a path instead of skidding around a turn like doing a
Okay, yeah.
like a donut, or it's not slipping in a turn, so it's not like falling. Imagine you're on a bank and your stock falling to the inside.
Yeah.
That's called a slip, and then the other one's called a skid. You don't want to be skidding or slipping, and you don't want to be losing airspeed. So, although it sounds casual, I'm just going to turn towards the runway right now. I'm checking a whole bunch of things at the same time. But yeah, a skidding turn with low airspeed will kill you. And you're 500 to 700 feet above the ground, the airplane will flip on its back, and you'll probably still be inverted.
Oh my gosh.
So these are things that, you say, what's the hardest part? Well, flying low and slow and landing.
Yeah.
With landing, everything has to come together at exactly the right time. And, having it all come together and you're 3/4 down the runway, that's no good.
Yeah, you need it to at the start.
And if you're 50 feet in front of the runway, it's no good. It's got to happen at the right place as well, right? So all these things come together. And it just takes practice and constant practice.
How long have you been flying for?
Well, I have 500 flying hours. I've got 40 hours, I think 40 or 45 hours flying this particular airplane.
Okay.
And in that, it's probably involved 100 and plus landings.
Okay.
Yeah. And so both these airplanes are 80 years old.
And how often do they go up?
In the summertime, we try to fly passengers on every nice weather day we can. We've done 27 passenger rides in the Tiger Moth this year, and we've done 11 in the Cornell.
Where does this plane fall in?
This airplane is my favorite airplane of all time.
Real? Okay.
Oh, yeah. It's a gentle, forgiving airplane.
Okay.
But it's still an airplane.
Yeah.
It can kill you. How else I don't have any other airplanes that I can sit there with my elbow out of the windows like this. You do that in the Tiger Moth, but the Tiger Moth's quite cramped.
Okay.
And it's you have to stay on top of the Tiger Moth more. It's not as forgiving as an airplane as this is. Would it be in Canada?
So how does someone come? How does the average Joe or Jason or Jane come and get to view and see this stuff?
Okay, well, we're in the process now of changing our open days. Normally we're open on Thursdays, and that's an open day. Anybody can come and go as they please. We generally have about 15 to 20 members show up that day.
Okay.
We're going to change it to Saturdays for next year to make it more convenient for the public.
So much, Bill. This experience
but
was
you would
amazing.
just drop in.
The wind blowing through my hair. I know it's not something that you might remember or feel right now, but it was the best experience, and getting to see my house from above in the shoreline and where I kayak. This is a memory that will live on with me forever, and conquering my fear and actually getting the opportunity to fly the plane. Thank you, Ellen Jacobs, for capturing the pictures of me in the air. This is my favorite one. Let's see some other planes.
Plus, out on the field, we've got 2 Canadian aircraft, the Grumman Tracker in the gray.
Yeah.
It's a anti-submarine aircraft that flew off the aircraft carriers in the 1960s. Canada had. This one's on.
So what do you mean by how is it anti-submarine?
We can go into that. So it would take off the aircraft carrier.
Yeah.
And if you can see just kind of on the belly, it's got like a little pot belly sticking out.
Yes.
It's actually a radar dish, thing, and during flight it comes down about 2 feet, and so it can sweep the area for radar.
Oh, okay.
It's got on the back of it, it looks like it has a little peanut sticking out the back of the tail.
Yeah, yeah.
That's actually the end of a 30-foot long boom that extends out behind it during flight. And that peanut is a magnetic anomaly detector, a MAD, and it can pick up magnetic fields underwater. So submarines, because they're so big,
have
their own magnetic field, so they'll see the deviation. So once they detect that they think they found a submarine, the radar would pick up anything on the surface, including a periscope. It could pick that up on a good day.
Yeah, yeah.
They would fly over the area. In the back of the engine, what they call nacelles, which are the fairings around the engines at the very back, it's all open. There's 12 tubes, 12 on each side. There's these tubes, and in each tube would be a buoy, which is about 3 feet long, about 6 inches, 8 inches in diameter. They would pop those out in determined areas, like in a circle, and they would sink below the water, and they had microphones.
Yes. Oh.
So then they would find the submarine by sound. Then the aircraft would come back, and the bomb bay door is open. That's why it's looking like it's almost touching the ground in the center. And they would drop torpedoes or depth charges to sink the submarine.
Huh.
And the spotlight on the wing is for nighttime, so they had to identify something on the surface at night.
Yes.
Use that spotlight.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
So driving by, I don't appreciate it as
Yeah.
much. Now I'm gonna walk over.
So the last airplane on the stands at the end is a MiG-15. It's not literally a MiG-15 because it was built in Czechoslovakia and they had a different name for it, but it is a MiG-15 built in Czechoslovakia. And that was basically an amazing surprise to the Americans in the Korean War when they went over to fight in the Korean War, and the Russians supplied those to North Korea. The West had no idea that something that cool and that capable was available.
Okay.
And it was one of the best jet fighters in the 1955 to 59.
I ended my evening on the water that I had just flown above. Please like, share, and subscribe. Until next time, stay safe, have fun, and keep enjoying the wildlife.